The grain smells wrong. That is what Marcus notices first, not the screaming from the walls, not the Gallic war horns tearing apart the gray September dawn, but the grain. It has gone sour. He cups what remains in both hands 2 days' worth, maybe 3. Around him, 80,000 Roman soldiers are making the same count in the same gray light. The double ring of earthworks stretching 15 miles in one direction, 25 in the other, holds them all besiegers and besieged at once, locked inside a geometry of mutual desperation. The smell of rotting provisions mixes with the smell of men who have not bathed in weeks, and leather worn through, and horses that will not be horses much longer. Somewhere behind the walls of Alesia, 100,000 Gauls are starving. The Romans, it turns out, are not far behind. So, how did the greatest military machine the ancient world had ever produced come so close to collapsing not from a sword through the chest, but from an empty stomach? Rome in the 1st century before the Common Era is not the marble city that paintings remember. It is loud. It smells of fish sauce and horse dung and bread baking before the sun clears the Capitoline Hill. And it runs on grain the way a fire runs on wood constantly, desperately, without pause. Every Roman knows this in the back of their body, the way you know you need air. The city of 1 million people imports enough wheat each year to fill hundreds of thousands of amphorae, sailing from Egypt and North Africa and Sicily on ships that cannot be late, cannot be sunk, cannot fail. Without the grain, Rome does not slow down. Rome stops. Julius Caesar knows this better than anyone alive. He is 50 years old, sharp-eyed, chronically in debt, and possessed by a single grinding obsession, control. Not just of men or of territories, but of the invisible threads that keep men alive long enough to be useful to him. He has read every military disaster he can find. He knows Rome has lost more armies to hunger than to iron-hole expeditions swallowed by bad harvests and broken supply lines. He has built his Gallic campaign on one foundational belief. An army is only as dangerous as its last meal. For 5 years it has worked. The legions have moved through Gaul like a machine requisitioning grain from allied tribes, organizing river depots, rationing with a precision that borders on obsession. Caesar believes he has won this war. He has not yet understood that his enemy has been studying the same lesson. In the spring of 52 BC, a young Arverni nobleman named Vercingetorix does something no Gallic leader has done before. He does not ride out to meet Rome on the open field. He burns his own cities. Town after town, granaries, grain stores, cattle herds, entire seasons of harvest. Vercingetorix orders his own people to destroy everything they cannot carry in their hands. He understands, with a clarity that terrifies even his own war council, that Rome cannot be beaten with spears. Rome can only be beaten with hunger. Burn the food, strip the land, wait for the legions to hollow out, and then strike. Caesar watches the smoke columns rising from the burning oppida of central Gaul and feels something he almost never allows himself to feel: alarm. His supply lines, those painstakingly maintained rivers of salted pork, dried lentils, and hard wheat, now stretch across a landscape of ash and stripped earth. The foraging parties come back with less, then less again. He writes in his dispatches, and Caesar always writes, always accounts, always measures that the soldiers were suffering greatly from want of grain. He does not write what it feels like to look at the faces of 50,000 men whose ribs are beginning to show through their tunics. He pursues Vercingetorix north. Vercingetorix pulls behind the walls of Alesia, a hilltop fortress in the territory of the Mandubii, taking 100,000 fighters and civilians inside with him. Caesar throws a double ring of fortifications around the entire hill. He settles in for a siege. But the question nobody in Rome is asking yet is this: who exactly is being trapped? Caesar's logistic system is, by any measure of the ancient world, extraordinary. He has requisitioned grain from allied Gallic tribes, the Aedui, the Remi, the Lingones, hauling it in heavy ox carts along roads his own engineers have cut through raw forest and bog. He has positioned supply depots at river confluences, calculated march rations to the individual day, and organized a food distribution chain that runs from the quaestor's ledgers down to the contubernium. 8 men sharing a tent, a hand millstone, and a blackened bronze pot. Each legionary carries 17 days of grain on his back when he marches. The Roman army does not stumble blind through a country and hope to eat. It moves fed, or it does not move at all. For 6 weeks, the system holds. Then, in late August, a relief army of 250,000 Gauls arrives at Alesia. Caesar is now besieging Alesia from the inside while being besieged from the outside. His 80,000 men face enemies on both sides of their own walls. The grain shipments from allied tribes already unreliable on roads, now contested by Gallic cavalry, slow to almost nothing. Foraging parties that ride out do not all ride back. Men begin eating the horses. The leather of old sandals, boiled until soft enough to swallow. By September, the ration has been cut so severely that Caesar writes something in his memoirs he almost never writes. He considers abandoning the siege. And if he pulls back if the supply system fails completely, 5 years of conquest unravels in a single retreat. What, then, was any of it for? But here is what the history books do not tell you. The Roman military food system was not designed to feed soldiers. It was designed to control them. The grain ration, the Annona Militaris, was not a kindness extended downward from Rome to its fighting men. It was a leash. Roman soldiers were paid partly in grain before they were ever paid in silver. The food was deducted directly from their wages. Lose your equipment, pay for the replacement in rations. Perform badly, watch your unit's grain allocation shrink. The punishment called decimation, 1 man in 10 beaten to death by his own companions, was always paired with a food reduction for the survivors, as if the hunger itself were the real message. Rome had discovered something no other civilization had fully grasped. You do not control an army with fear alone. You control it with hunger held in reserve. The sophisticated supply chains, the river depots, the quaestors with their wax tablets, the endless requisitions and inventories, these were not merely logistics. They were instruments of obedience. An army that depends on Rome for every calorie is an army that cannot afford to rebel against Rome. Caesar understood this completely, which is why what he does next is so ruthless that he almost does not write about it at all. He does not retreat to feed his men. He orders the Gallic civilians, the women, the elderly, the children expelled by Vercingetorix to preserve the warriors' rations driven back. He refuses to let them through the Roman lines. He leaves them to starve in the ground between the two armies. Caesar does not feed his men by finding more food. He feeds them by making his enemies' hunger worse. In the last week of September, 52 BC, the Gallic relief army makes its final assault on Caesar's outer wall. 250,000 men throwing themselves against Roman earthworks in the dark. The noise men who survived it struggled for the rest of their lives to describe it is not a battle sound. It is something more like weather, like a storm that has learned to want something. Caesar rides the full length of the outer fortification himself, his red commander's cloak visible in the torchlight, directing reserve cohorts to the points where the line is bending, holding the whole impossible geometry together by the force of a single man's refusal to accept what the numbers say. The line holds. The relief army breaks. Vercingetorix rides out of Alesia the next morning in full armor, his most theatrical armor, the sources suggest, and lays his sword at Caesar's feet. 100,000 Gauls surrender. The food problem solves itself, immediately and brutally, in captured Gallic cattle and the enemy's own stores. But the civilians, the ones in the no man's land, Caesar does not write about them. He writes about the victory. He writes about the swords laid down, the captives allocated among the legions as slaves, the territory declared pacified. He always writes in the third person, Caesar did this, Caesar ordered that, as if the man making the decisions exists at a safe remove from the things those decisions produce. The greatest military supply system the ancient world had built just saved Rome's empire in Gaul. It did so by feeding the soldiers and leaving everyone else to the mathematics of starvation. The conqueror and the accountant had always been the same man. The Roman military supply system outlasted Caesar by 500 years. Augustus formalized it into a permanent state apparatus, the Annona Militaris that requisitioned grain from across the provinces, stored it in long stone warehouses along every frontier, and guaranteed every legionary 3 measured meals a day until the empire could no longer guarantee anything at all. The roads Rome built to move food became the arteries through which European trade, language, and law would flow for 1,000 years after the last legion disbanded. Roman logistics manuals, copied and recopied through Byzantine libraries and medieval monasteries, shaped every European army from the Carolingians to Napoleon, who famously understood that an army marches on its stomach and was, in this, simply repeating what Caesar had already proved. Today, the United States military feeds 1.3 million active duty personnel across more than 150 countries, and its doctrine maps almost precisely onto Roman principles: prepositioning of supplies, standardization of rations, supply line security treated as equal in priority to combat readiness. We look at Rome and see marble and legions and conquest. But the thing Rome built that no barbarian army could ever burn was the understanding that you do not win wars. You outlast them, and the only way to outlast them is to answer one question every single morning before the swords are drawn and the eagles raised and the orders given. Has everyone eaten? That question is 2,000 years old. It has never once stopped being asked. The grain smells wrong. That is still the most dangerous sentence a commander can hear. Not, the enemy is at the gates. Not, we are outnumbered. The army that runs out of bread before it runs out of courage will always lose. And every general who has ever held an empire in their hands has known it in their bones. The way Marcus knew it, cupping the last of his ration in the gray Alesia dawn. Caesar knew it. Rome knew it. And somewhere tonight, in a forward operating base in a country Rome never reached, a logistics officer is running the same calculation. The math has not changed. Only the names have. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting. We'll see you next time.